I'm Anya, 32, female. I live in a quiet suburban town with my husband, Mark. For the past 5 years, my life has been as neatly organized and peaceful as the library where I work. We had a comfortable routine, a loving partnership, and a future that looked clear and bright. But a piece of happy news, the one thing that should have completed our perfect picture, ended up inviting a monster into our home. A monster who wore the face of my mother-in-law. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our life before it all imploded was a portrait of contentment. Mark and I had built it carefully, brick by brick. We met in college, a whirlwind romance that had settled into a deep, comfortable love. He was ambitious and charismatic, a sales director who could charm anyone, and I was the quiet anchor to his bustling energy, a librarian who found solace in stories and order. Our house was our sanctuary, a modest two-story colonial with a garden I was fiercely proud of. It was filled with books, laughter, and the smell of coffee on weekend mornings. We had friends, we had careers we enjoyed, and most importantly, we had each other. We were a team, or so I believed. The only variable, the one element I could never quite predict or control, was Mark's mother, Eleanor. Eleanor was an interior designer, a profession that suited her perfectly. She saw the world, and everyone in it, as a room she was perpetually redecorating to her own exacting tastes. She was stylish, impeccably put together, and possessed a brand of charm that felt more like a weapon than a welcome. In the early years of our marriage, her intrusions were minor, packaged as helpful suggestions. The color of our living room walls was a little drab. The curtains were serviceable but lacked flair. My cooking was quaint. I learned to smile, nod, and then quietly do whatever I had intended to do in the first place. Mark, for his part, usually ran interference. "Mom, Anya's got it handled," he'd say gently, deflecting her attempts to rearrange our lives. He saw her as overbearing but ultimately harmless, a product of her generation who just wanted to feel needed. "That's just how she shows love, he'd explain, and for a long time I accepted it. I kept her at a polite distance, managing our interactions like a librarian managing a particularly loud and disruptive patron. We had been trying for a baby for about a year, a quiet, private journey filled with monthly hopes and gentle disappointments. We agreed not to tell anyone, not even our closest friends or family. It was our secret, a fragile wish we kept cupped in our hands. The stress of it had started to weigh on us, and we'd recently decided to take a break, to just let go and focus on each other for a while. And then, as life so often does, the moment we stopped looking for it, it happened. I was 2 weeks late, a fact I dismissed as stress until a wave of nausea sent me running from the circulation desk one morning. That evening, my hands trembled as I stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. It was real. It was happening. When I told Mark, his face broke into the widest, most joyful grin I had ever seen. He lifted me off my feet, spinning me around our kitchen until we were both dizzy with laughter. "We did it," he whispered, his forehead pressed against mine. "We're going to be parents." In that moment, the world was perfect. All the previous months of anxiety melted away, replaced by an overwhelming wave of pure, unadulterated happiness. We spent the evening curled on the sofa, talking in hushed, excited tones about names, about what kind of parents we wanted to be, about the future. We decided to keep the news to ourselves for a little longer, at least until the first trimester was over. We wanted to live inside our happy little bubble for as long as possible, to guard this precious secret before the world, and specifically Eleanor, rushed in. The next few weeks were a blissful haze. I felt like I was carrying a sunbeam inside me. My morning sickness was mild, and I found myself smiling for no reason as I shelved books at the library. Mark was more attentive than ever, bringing me breakfast in bed and rubbing my back when I felt tired. We were a unit, a secret club of two, soon to be three. Looking back, this was the calm before the hurricane. It was the last time our life was truly our own. The perfect picture was hanging squarely on the wall, and we had no idea that someone was about to walk into the room and tear it to shreds. The first hint of trouble came during our weekly Sunday call with Eleanor. "You sound Different Anya, she'd said, her voice sharp with suspicion. Are you feeling all right? I'd brushed it off, blaming a cold, but I felt a chill. She had an almost supernatural ability to sense when something was happening in our lives, a trait Mark called mother's intuition and I called invasive. For now, our secret was safe. We made it to the 12-week mark, saw the grainy ultrasound image of our tiny, wiggling baby, and heard its strong, thrumming heartbeat for the first time. The doctor said everything looked perfect. That night, clutching the black and white photo that was already the most precious thing we owned, we decided it was time. It was time to share our joy. We decided to tell our families the following weekend. We would start with my parents, whose reaction we knew would be pure, uncomplicated joy, and then we would face Alina. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of foreboding. It was just happy news. What could possibly go wrong? The announcement to my own parents was everything we'd hoped for. My mom cried, my dad hugged us both until we couldn't breathe, and the afternoon was spent celebrating with cake and non-alcoholic champagne. Their joy was simple and selfless. It was all about us and the new life we were creating. The following day, we drove to Mark's parents' house for dinner. My stomach was in knots, and it had nothing to do with morning sickness. I held Mark's hand tightly as we walked up the pristine flagstone path to the front door of the house Alina had designed to within an inch of its life. It was beautiful, but sterile, like a magazine spread you could never imagine actually living in. We waited until after dinner. Mark's father, a quiet man named Robert who had long ago retreated into the safe harbor of his workshop, was watching the news while Alina directed the conversation as always. Finally, Mark cleared his throat. Mom, Dad, he began, a proud smile on his face. We have some news. Anya and I are expecting. For a split second there was silence. Robert's face lit up with a genuine, warm smile. Well, that's wonderful news, he exclaimed, getting up to give us both a hearty pat on the back. Alina, however, remained seated. Her perfectly painted lips were pursed into a thin line, and her eyes scanned me from head to toe, as if she were inspecting a piece of furniture for flaws. Then, her expression shifted. The initial shock was replaced by a look of intense, possessive delight. It wasn't the warm joy of my own mother. It was the triumphant glee of someone who had just acquired a coveted new project. Oh my goodness, she finally squealed, the sound a little too high-pitched. A baby, my grandbaby, I knew it. I told you she sounded pregnant, Robert. She rushed over, not to hug me, but to place her perfectly manicured hands directly on my still flat stomach. We have so much to do, the nursery, the baby shower, the registry. I have the most wonderful theme in mind for the nursery, gender-neutral of course, but chic. Think minimalist woodland creatures. I felt a prickle of unease. We, she had said, not you, but we. I exchanged a look with Mark, who just gave me a small, placating smile. We're just happy to share the news, Alina, I said, trying to gently reclaim the moment. We haven't even started thinking about all that yet. Alina waved a dismissive hand. Nonsense, you have to get ahead of these things. The best decorators are booked months in advance. I'm pretty sure Anya can handle decorating, Mom, Mark interjected, but his tone lacked its usual firmness. He was too caught up in the excitement of the announcement to see the red flags that were already waving frantically in front of my eyes. The rest of the evening was a blur of Alina's plans. She talked about which obstetrician I had to switch to, a friend of hers who was the best in the state. She talked about the importance of her family name, dropping heavy hints about what the baby should be called. She didn't ask a single question about how I was feeling or what Mark and I wanted. It was as if we were merely vessels for her grandchild, secondary characters in her story. The unwanted guest had not just arrived, she had moved in. Over the next few weeks, my life was no longer my own. Alina's presence became a constant, suffocating weight. She would text me articles at all hours about the dangers of everything from lukewarm coffee to non-organic kale. She would call Mark daily, feeding him information and anxieties that he would then dutifully relay to me. Mom says we should really think about cord blood banking. She sent me a link. Mom thinks we should hire a night nurse. She knows someone. The nursery became her primary battlefield. I was a graphic designer on the side of my librarian job with a passion for art and color, and I had been dreaming of creating a warm, personal space for our baby. I had sketches, color palettes, and ideas for a hand-painted mural. When I tried to show Alina my plans, she gave them a cursory glance and said, "Oh, that's sweet. But a bit homemade, don't you think? We need something more cohesive, more professional." One afternoon, I came home from work to find her in our spare room, the future nursery with a contractor. They were taking measurements. "Alina, what is this?" I asked, my voice tight. "I'm just getting some quotes, darling," she said breezily. "I have a vision for this space. We'll do a beautiful, built-in shelving unit here, and the crib will go against that wall for optimal energy flow." The betrayal wasn't just Alina's boundary stomping, it was Mark's passivity. He was caught in the middle and he was failing. Every time I tried to talk to him about it, he would get defensive. "She's just excited, Anya, can't you see that? She's trying to help." "Help," I'd argue, my voice rising with frustration. "Mark, she's taking over. This is our baby, our home, our life. She doesn't get a vote." "You're being too sensitive," he'd say, the words a dagger to my heart. "You're hormonal. Just try to get along with her for me, for the sake of peace." He didn't see her actions as a hostile takeover, he saw my reactions as the problem. He wanted me to absorb her intrusions, to make myself smaller to accommodate her, all for the sake of avoiding conflict. The poison she was pouring into our lives wasn't just her controlling nature, it was the way it was eroding the foundation of my marriage. She was turning my husband, my partner, my teammate, into her willing accomplice. He was letting her bulldoze me, and asking me to smile while it happened. I felt profoundly, terrifyingly alone. The perfect picture was now warped, the image of our happy family being painted over by someone else's brush, and my own husband was handing her the paint. The breaking point, the moment the hairline crack in Alina's facade splintered into a full-blown chasm, came about a month later. It was my birthday. Mark had planned a quiet, romantic dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant. It was supposed to be a reprieve, a night just for us, away from the constant barrage of baby-related directives from his mother. We had just ordered when my phone buzzed. And then Mark's buzzed. Then mine again. I opened my phone to a flood of notifications from a social media app I rarely used. Alina had tagged me in a post. My heart sank as I read it. There, for all the world to see, was a professionally taken photo of Alina, beaming, with a hand resting on a mannequin's stomach that had been dressed in a maternity shirt. The caption read, "Beyond thrilled to finally announce that I'm going to be a grandmother. The promotion of a lifetime. Get ready for a spoiled grandbaby, world. Can't wait to meet our little one. Thank you, Mark and Anya, for giving me the greatest gift." She had announced my pregnancy to her hundreds of friends and followers without my permission, framing it as if it were her own achievement. She had used a mannequin. She hadn't even included a photo of us. My private, precious news had been turned into her social media content. "What is this?" I whispered, sliding my phone across the table to Mark. His face went pale as he read the post. The comments were already rolling in. "Congratulations, Alina. You're going to be the most glamorous grandma. So happy for you." "I can't believe it," Mark muttered, shaking his head. "She's gone too far." For a fleeting moment, I felt a surge of relief. Finally, he saw it. Finally, he understood. The relief was short-lived. His phone rang. It was Alina. He answered, his voice tight. "Mom, what were you thinking? You can't just post something like that." I could hear her saccharine voice through the phone, a torrent of excuses. "Oh, darling, I was just so excited I couldn't hold it in anymore. Everyone was asking, it's a celebration, don't be such a stick in the mud." Mark's resolve began to crumble before my eyes. "But it wasn't your news to share," he stammered. "It's Anya's birthday, we were going to." "I know, and this is my birthday gift to her." Announcing it to the world. "Now she doesn't have to have all those awkward conversations." "It's done, you're welcome," she chirped. He was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed, a sound of complete and utter defeat. "Okay, Mom, just please ask next time." He hung up the phone and looked at me, his eyes pleading. "She says she's sorry, she just got carried away." I stared at him, my heart turning to a block of ice. "Okay, Mom, that's it, Mark. She hijacked our pregnancy announcement for her own ego on my birthday, and your response is please ask next time." "What do you want me to do, Anya?" he asked, his voice rising in exasperation. "Scream at her, disown her, she's my mother." "I want you to defend me. I want you to defend us," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't known I possessed. "I want you to tell her that what she did was unacceptable, and that there will be consequences for stomping all over us. But you can't, can you? You are so terrified of upsetting her that you will let her destroy our happiness. Dinner was ruined. The car ride home was silent and thick with tension. I felt a cold, hard knot of certainty forming in my gut. This wasn't just about an overbearing mother-in-law anymore. This was about a husband who was fundamentally incapable of putting his wife and child first. His loyalty was compromised, his priorities hopelessly skewed. He didn't have my back. He never would. I went to bed early, feigning a headache. I couldn't bear to look at him. Hours later, I woke up thirsty and padded downstairs for a glass of water. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard Mark's voice coming from the den. He was on the phone, his voice low. My breath caught in my throat. I crept closer, hiding in the shadows of the hallway, and listened. It was Alina. "Just needs to calm down," Mark was saying, his voice weary. "Her hormones are all over the place. You know how women get." A cold dread washed over me. He was using my pregnancy against me, painting me as an irrational, hysterical woman to appease his mother. "Of course, darling," Alina's voice cooed, dripping with false sympathy. "It's a difficult adjustment for some people. They get selfish. They forget that a baby is a family affair, not just theirs. She'll come around. She just needs to understand that I'm only trying to ensure this baby has the best of everything, things she might not even think of. We just have to manage her, be patient with her little feelings." Manage me, that was the word that broke me. I wasn't his partner, I was a problem to be managed. His mother wasn't just overexcited, she was actively, deliberately positioning herself as the true caretaker, the one with the superior knowledge and taste, and casting me as the emotional, incompetent incubator. And my husband was co-signing the entire narrative. He was letting her frame me as the enemy in our own story. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt, the sadness, the frustration, it all coalesced into a cold, hard diamond of resolve. The tears that had been threatening to fall all night dried up. My trembling stopped. I stood there in the dark, listening to my husband and his mother strategize on how to handle me, and I realized the truth. I was at war, and I had been fighting the wrong battle. My enemy wasn't just Alina. It was the toxic, manipulative partnership she had with her son. The mask had not just slipped, it had been ripped off, revealing the ugly, twisted reality beneath. They thought I was weak, emotional, and manageable. They had no idea what I was capable of. Standing there in the dark, a silent witness to their betrayal, I knew one thing for sure: they were going to find out. The next morning, I woke up a different person. The soft, hopeful Anya who had been so excited to share her joy was gone. In her place was a woman with a core of ice and a mind whirring with cold, clear purpose. I greeted Mark with a placid, distant smile. When he apologized for our fight, saying he was just stressed, I nodded and said, "I understand. You're right, my hormones are probably making me oversensitive." I saw the relief wash over his face. He believed he had successfully managed me. He had no idea that I was simply playing the part they had assigned me. My new performance was that of the defeated, compliant wife. It was a role I would play with Oscar-worthy dedication. My first call was to my best friend, Jenna. I met her for coffee before my shift at the library, my hands wrapped around a warm mug, my voice steady as I laid out the entire sordid story, from the nursery takeover to the social media announcement to the late-night phone call I'd overheard. Jenna, a lawyer with a mind as sharp as a shard of glass, listened without interruption. When I finished, she didn't offer platitudes or tell me to try and work it out. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with a furious loyalty. "Okay," she said, her voice firm. "So we're dealing with a classic case of narcissistic manipulation, with the husband as a willing enabler. They see you as an obstacle. What's the end game, Anya? What do you want to happen?" "I want my life back," I said, the words tasting like freedom. "And I want them to understand, truly understand, the consequences of what they've done. I want to expose her. I don't want her to have any power over me or my child ever again." "Good," Jenna nodded. "We need a strategy. You can't fight a manipulator with emotion. You fight them with facts, with evidence. From now on, you are an intelligence agent in your own home. Document everything." And so my investigation began. I became a meticulous archivist of my own misery. Every manipulative text from Alina was screenshotted and saved to a secure cloud folder that Jenna helped me set up. Just saw the most divine cashmere baby blanket. I went ahead and ordered it for you, darling. You can return that polyester one you put on the registry. Screenshot. Are you sure you should be eating that? The sodium content is very high for a developing fetus. Screenshot. I bought a voice-activated recorder, a tiny device that looked like a USB stick. I started carrying it in my pocket. Whenever Alina would call Mark and he'd put her on speakerphone, convinced of my docile presence on the sofa, I would hit record. The conversations were chilling. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She would praise him, flatter his ego, and then subtly undermine me. You're being such a strong husband, managing all this so well. I worry about Anya's stress levels. It can't be good for the baby. Maybe it would be best if I took the lead on the baby shower planning, just to take one more thing off her plate, she'd say. He'd always agree. That's a great idea, Mom. Thanks for being so thoughtful. I started connecting the dots, looking backward. I remembered comments from other family members at weddings and holidays, comments I had dismissed at the time. Mark's cousin had once joked, "Good luck, Anya. No one can throw a party or run your life quite like Aunt Alina." An aunt had pulled me aside after our engagement and said, "Just remember to stand your ground with her. She means well, but her well can feel like a steamroller." I realized this wasn't new behavior. This was a pattern. She had likely been manipulating Mark his entire life, conditioning him to seek her approval and view her interference as love. I was just the first person who had ever truly threatened her absolute control over her son. My compliance was my camouflage. I agreed to her nursery theme. "Oh, Alina, you're right. The minimalist woodland creature's idea is so much more chic," I said, my voice dripping with false admiration. I let her take over the baby shower plans. I even let her accompany me to an obstetrician's appointment, where she proceeded to ask more questions than I did. I sat there, a serene smile on my face, while inside I was a coiled spring. Every concession I made, every time I let her think she had won, she grew bolder, more arrogant, and more careless with her words. She was building my case for me. My greatest source of support was Jenna. We'd meet weekly. She'd review the evidence I'd gathered, her lawyer's brain categorizing each text and conversation. "This is classic gaslighting," she'd say, pointing to a transcript. "And this is triangulation. She's positioning herself between you and Mark." She was giving me the language to understand the psychological warfare I was enduring. She was also my rock, reminding me that I wasn't crazy, that my feelings were valid. "She wants you to feel isolated," Jenna told me one evening as we looked over a particularly damning text exchange. "That's how manipulators maintain power. But she's miscalculated. She doesn't know you have me." While Alina was busy weaving her web, I was weaving my own, right under her nose. I was playing the long game. I found out from Mark's dad, Robert, during a rare moment alone with him in his workshop, that Alina was planning a massive party for their 35th wedding anniversary. It was her magnum opus, a huge, catered affair at a fancy country club designed to cement her status as the queen bee of her social circle. "She's been planning it for a year," Robert said with a weary sigh, sanding a piece of wood. "Everything has to be perfect." A slow smile spread across my face. A party. A huge party with all of her friends, all of the family, all of the people she so desperately needed to impress. It was the perfect stage. Alina thought she was planning an anniversary party. But I knew what she was really planning. She was planning the venue for her own downfall. The anniversary party became my focal point, the destination on my grim new map. Alina, in her hubris, was creating the perfect weapon for me to use against her. She was gathering the jury herself. As she buzzed around, consumed with caterers, florists, and seating charts, I moved silently in the background, meticulously constructing my anniversary gift. My plan was simple in concept, but required surgical precision in its execution. I was going to expose her, not with angry accusations, but with her own words, her own actions, presented calmly and irrefutably in a forum she couldn't escape. The centerpiece of my plan was a video. It wouldn't be a dramatic, shaky cam exposé. No, that wasn't my style. It would be clean, elegant, and devastatingly effective, much like something a librarian and part-time graphic designer would create. I spent my evenings, after Mark was asleep, locked in my small home office. The room that was supposed to be for my design work became my war room. I sifted through the mountain of evidence I had collected, my heart a cold, steady drum. I compiled the screenshots of her texts, arranging them chronologically. The subtle digs, the boundary-crossing suggestions, the outright commands. On their own, they could be dismissed as overeager. Together, they painted a chilling portrait of relentless control. The audio files were the most powerful ammunition. Using a simple editing software, I pulled out the most damning clips from my recordings. Aliner's voice, smooth as silk, saying, "We just have to manage her, be patient with her little feelings." Mark's voice, full of weary compliance, saying, "Her hormones are all over the place. You know how women get." Aliner's voice again, discussing the baby shower with one of her friends on speakerphone. "Honestly, it's a blessing I'm handling it. Anya has such simple taste. We can't have the poor child's first celebration looking like it was done on a shoestring budget." I layered these audio clips over a slideshow of the text messages. I didn't add dramatic music or angry text. I just let their own words do the work. The presentation was stark and factual, text on a black screen followed by the evidence. The narrative, Anya is emotional and hormonal. Then, the audio of Mark and Aliner discussing my feelings. The narrative, Anya is incompetent. Then, the text about my simple taste and the need for her to take over. I even found, through some clever social media sleuthing, a post from Mark's cousin complaining about how Aliner had hijacked her wedding planning years ago. I took a screenshot and added it to the pile. This wasn't just about me, it was about a pattern of behavior that had affected the entire family. While building my case, I was also building my escape route. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about my future and my baby's future. I met with Jenna in her professional capacity as a lawyer. We opened a new bank account in my name only. I started quietly funneling a portion of my salary into it. I researched apartments in a town closer to my parents and sister. I packed a go bag with essentials, important documents, cash, a change of clothes, the voice recorder, and stored it in the trunk of my car. I was preparing for every eventuality. The best-case scenario was that Mark would see the light, be horrified by his own behavior, and we could, with immense effort and therapy, rebuild. But I was not counting on the best-case scenario. I was preparing for the worst, that I would have to walk away from my marriage. The thought was terrifying, but the thought of raising my child in that toxic environment was infinitely more so. I was no longer a wife trying to save her marriage. I was a mother protecting her child. Aliner, meanwhile, was oblivious, lost in her party-planning ecstasy. The theme was a love for the ages, with a color scheme of champagne and gold. She talked endlessly about the ice sculpture, the string quartet, and the custom cocktail being named the Aliner. She even insisted on having a large screen and projector set up to display a slideshow of her and Robert through the years, a slideshow she had tasked Mark with creating. It was the perfect opening. "Oh, Mark, you're so busy with work," I said one evening, my voice full of feigned sympathy. "Why don't you let me handle the slideshow? It can be my anniversary gift to them. I'm good with that kind of software." Mark was immensely relieved to have one thing taken off his plate. "Would you, Anya? That would be amazing. See, Mom, Anya's happy to help." Aliner looked momentarily suspicious, but her ego won out. "Well, as long as it's done professionally," she sniffed. "It needs to be elegant." "Of course," I replied with a sweet smile. "It will be a presentation they'll never forget." I took the USB drive with all the family photos from Mark and got to work. I created 2 video files. The first was the decoy, a perfectly lovely, schmaltzy slideshow of Aliner and Robert's 35 years together, set to their wedding song. The second file, titled The Centerpiece, was my bomb. The night before the party, I felt a strange calm. I had done everything I could. I had the evidence, the plan, and the escape route. I looked at myself in the mirror, my hand resting on my growing belly. My baby was about 5 months along now, a tangible, real presence. "I'm doing this for you," I whispered. "So you can grow up surrounded by real love, not manipulation. So you can be free." Aliner thought the centerpiece of her party would be an ice sculpture or a champagne tower. She had no idea the real centerpiece was a small USB drive in my purse, waiting to bring her entire, carefully constructed world crashing down. The country club was exactly as ostentatious as I had imagined. Gold and champagne were everywhere, dripping from chandeliers and pooling on tables. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters circulated with trays of canapés. Elinor was in her element, gliding through the room like a queen in her court, accepting compliments on the decor, her dress, her very existence. She wore a shimmering gold gown, looking every bit the star of the show. Mark, handsome in his suit, was right by her side, beaming proudly. He seemed to have gotten our recent tensions swept up in the grandeur of it all. He squeezed my hand. "Isn't this incredible? Mom really outdid herself." "It's something," I said, my voice neutral. I felt strangely detached, like an anthropologist observing a foreign ritual. I clutched my small evening bag, the USB drive inside a cold, heavy weight. Jenna arrived, a vision of calm professionalism in a sleek black dress. She wasn't here as a guest. She was here as my witness and my getaway driver. She gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. "You ready?" she whispered. I nodded. "As I'll ever be." We made it through the dinner, a multi-course affair punctuated by gushing speeches from Elinor's friends. They toasted her generosity, her style, her strength. I ate mechanically, my focus entirely on the large projector screen that stood behind the head table. The plan was to wait for the official toasts to conclude. Elinor naturally would have the final word. She would get up to thank her guests, and I suspected to make some grand, possessive statement about her impending grandmotherhood. That would be my cue. As dessert was served, Robert, bless his simple heart, gave a short, sweet speech about his wife, ending with a heartfelt to my Elinor. 35 years, I love you." Then, Elinor stood up, tapping her champagne glass for attention. A hush fell over the room. This was the moment everyone was waiting for. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us," she began, her voice resonating with practiced charm. "Looking out at all your faces, I'm filled with such gratitude for the beautiful life Robert and I have built." She went on for a few minutes, thanking friends and family. Then her eyes landed on me. A patronizing smile played on her lips. "And as we celebrate the past, we also look to the future. A future made all the brighter by the news that our family is growing. Mark and Anya are expecting our first grandchild." A wave of polite awes rippled through the crowd. "I know," she continued, placing a hand on her chest, "that I will be the most devoted, hands-on grandmother a child could ever ask for. And to kick off the celebration of our family's next chapter, my darling daughter-in-law Anya has prepared a little trip down memory lane for us all." She gestured towards me, and then to the screen. "Anya, darling, if you would." It was my cue. But not the one she was expecting. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs, and walked calmly to the laptop connected to the projector. I gave the DJ, a young man I had spoken to earlier, a small nod. He knew what to do. I didn't insert the schmaltzy family photo slideshow. I clicked on the file named The Centerpiece. I picked up the microphone from the lectern. "Thank you, Elinor," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the silent room. "You're right, it is a time to celebrate family, and to celebrate truth. You've talked a lot about what a wonderful, hands-on grandmother you're going to be. So I thought, instead of a slideshow of old photos, it would be more fitting to give everyone a glimpse into the kind of hands-on involvement you've already had in our lives. This is my anniversary gift to you." A toast to the truth. Before she could react, I hit play. The screen flickered to life. The first slide appeared in stark white text on a black background. The narrative, "Anya is too emotional." Then her voice, crisp and clear, filled the room. "Her hormones are all over the place, you know how women get." It was followed immediately by Mark's voice. "We just have to manage her, be patient with her little feelings." A collective gasp went through the crowd. I saw Mark's face drain of all color. He looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Elinor's smile froze on her face. The next slide. The narrative, "Anya is incompetent." Then, a cascade of her texts flashed on the screen, the ones criticizing my registry, my food choices, my decorating ideas. The audio of her telling her friend that my taste was simple, and that the baby shower couldn't look like it was done on a shoestring budget, played over them. People were murmuring now, turning to look at Elinor, whose face was a mask of pure fury. The presentation continued, relentless and methodical. Screenshot of her social media announcement using the mannequin, the audio of her plotting to take over the nursery. the screenshot from Mark's cousin about her wedding. It was a 5-minute-long, systematic dismantling of her entire public persona, built with her own words. Mark was on his feet, staring at the screen in horror, then at me, his mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. Eleanor was sputtering, "This is outrageous. Stop this is a lie." But no one was listening to her. They were listening to the recordings. They were reading her texts. They were hearing the truth. The final slide was a picture of the ultrasound. Underneath it, a single sentence, "My baby will be rise." ED with honesty, not manipulation. Then silence. I switched off the projector. The string quartet had stopped playing. Every single eye in the room was on me, then on Eleanor and Mark. The air was thick with shock and humiliation. Eleanor looked like her soul had been ripped out of her body on live television. Her perfect party, her perfect image was utterly destroyed. I placed the microphone back on the lectern. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I looked directly at my husband, whose face was a mess of confusion, shame, and dawning comprehension. Then I looked at the woman who had tried to steal my joy, my autonomy, and my peace. "The party's over, Eleanor," I said softly. Then I turned, walked away from the head table, met Jenna at the door, and didn't look back. Leaving the country club felt like stepping out of a pressurized cabin into the clean, cold night air. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel an ecstatic rush of victory. I just felt quiet. The adrenaline that had sustained me for weeks drained away, leaving a profound and aching emptiness in its place. Jenna drove, her hands steady on the wheel, her presence a silent, solid comfort. She didn't ask if I was okay. She knew I wasn't. She just drove me to the pre-booked hotel room we had arranged, a sterile, anonymous space that felt like a sanctuary. The fallout began before we even got there. My phone, which I had put on silent, began to light up like a firework. A barrage of texts and missed calls, dozens from Mark. A few from my own shocked parents, a couple from other family members. And one, full of venomous rage, from a number I didn't recognize but knew belonged to one of Eleanor's close friends. I turned it off and handed it to Jenna. "Can you just hold on to this for me?" She took it without a word. The days that followed were a blur. I stayed in the hotel, living off room service and Jenna's unwavering support. She acted as my gatekeeper, fielding the frantic calls from Mark. He was, by her account, a complete wreck. He was horrified, ashamed, and desperate to talk to me. He said he never realized the full extent of what his mother was doing, or how his own weakness had contributed to it. He said hearing his own words played back to a room full of people was the most humiliating and clarifying moment of his life. I listened to Jenna's reports with a kind of detached sorrow. A part of me was glad he finally understood, but a much larger part knew that his awakening had come far too late, and only at the cost of my public detonation of our lives. He hadn't seen the truth when I had begged him to, his wife, in private. He only saw it when he was shamed in front of his peers. That knowledge was a bitter pill to swallow. The news from the family front was chaotic. Eleanor and Robert had apparently fled their own party in disgrace. Her carefully curated social circle had imploded. The story, in all its juicy detail, had spread like wildfire. She was no longer the queen bee. She was a pariah, the subject of whispered gossip and scorn. Some family members were furious with me for causing such a public scene. Others, like Mark's cousin, had quietly reached out to Jenna to say, "Thank you. She's been doing this for years, and no one ever had the guts to stop her." My own parents were shocked but supportive. "We had no idea it was that bad, honey," my mom said, her voice thick with regret. "We are here for you, whatever you decide." After a week of silence, I agreed to see Mark. We met at a neutral location, a quiet park halfway between my hotel and his house. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, and his eyes were red-rimmed and haunted. He didn't make excuses. He just apologized, over and over. He cried, telling me he had been a coward, a fool, and a terrible husband. He told me he had cut off contact with his mother completely, that he had finally told her that her behavior was toxic, and that he had chosen me and our baby. "I love you, Anya," he pleaded, his hands reaching for mine. I let him take them, they felt like a stranger's. "I know I broke us, but please let me try to fix it. I'll do anything, therapy, couples counseling, anything you want. I'll spend the rest of my life earning back your trust." I looked at the man I had loved for a decade, the man I had built a life with, the father of my child, and I felt pity. But the love, the trust, the bedrock of our partnership was gone. It had been pulverized into dust by months of betrayal. I don't know, Mark, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I don't know if it can be fixed. You didn't just let her hurt me, you helped her. You chose her side until the moment it became publicly embarrassing for you. How do I ever trust that you won't do it again? I told him I was moving out. I had already put a deposit down on the apartment near my parents. I needed space. I needed to build a life for my baby that was safe and stable, away from the wreckage of our marriage. I told him the do. R wasn't closed forever, but it was up to him to prove, through consistent action over a very long time, that he was a man I could rely on. The burden of proof was now entirely his. The months that followed were about sweeping up the shards. I moved into my new apartment. It was smaller than our house, but it was mine. My parents and Jenna helped me paint the nursery in bright, warm colors, and I spent my evenings painting the mural of whimsical animals I had always dreamed of. It was a space built from my own love and my own vision. I focused on my health, my work, and preparing for my baby. Mark kept his promises. He started intensive individual therapy. He sent me articles about narcissistic family systems and gaslighting, with notes saying, I'm learning, I'm trying to understand what I did. He didn't push or crowd me. He gave me space, checking in with quiet texts, asking if I needed anything, always respecting my boundaries. He drove 2 hours every weekend to attend birthing classes with me, sitting silently in the back, just being present. When our son Leo was born, Mark was at the hospital. He held him for the first time with tears streaming down his face. He looked at me over our baby's head, his eyes full of a raw, painful hope. Our old life was destroyed. The perfect picture was ashes. But here, in the quiet of the hospital room, holding our son, was a chance for a new beginning. I don't know if Mark and I will ever fully rebuild what we had. The trust is a fragile, tender thing, like a seedling growing in scorched earth. But for the first time in a long time, the future doesn't feel like a battleground. It feels like an open page. And this time, I am the only author.